The New York Giants signing on Saturday evening of wide receiver Darnell Mooney capped off what has been a busy and pretty productive second wave of free agency for the Giants. Ed Valentine, a Big Blue View here. Thought we would talk about that second wave of free agency and how free agency overall has set up the Giants for the upcoming 2026 NFL draft. And I always say that the results of free agency tell us a lot about how the priorities, how the board is going to be set up for the NFL draft, and I think that has been the case here for the Giants. General managers will tell you that they don't like to shop hungry when it comes to the draft, which means, of course, that they don't like to go in to the draft with a whole slew of needs. Right? And I think the Giants have done a good job here, especially in this second wave of free agency, of filling a lot of needs with adequate to better than adequate players at low cost, with low cost contracts, a lot of 1-year deals. So they've done a pretty good job of filling a lot of spots on the roster and leaving themselves in a situation where they're at most positions, they are at least adequately stocked in terms of players. Now, there's a couple of positions where I think that that is not yet the case, and who knows what'll happen here in free agency going forward. There's still good players out there. There's still deals to be made, but I think that the Giants still don't have a player on the roster who they would really, really want at this point in time to be their starting right guard. So perhaps you're looking at a situation where the Giants try to address that need in the draft. A lot of guys in the draft. Chase Besantis of Texas A&M, Jennings Dunker of Iowa, Emmanuel Prignon of Oregon are all guys that could be in play on day 2 of the draft, especially in the second round. Giants without a third round pick, but you look at what they've done in free agency, and it's kind of a tell that they'll be in the market for interior offensive line help come the draft next month. And the other place looks like defensive tackle. I'm still hopeful that the Giants will add someone like Sebastian Joseph Day, who played the last couple of years with the Tennessee Titans, maybe long in the tooth, longtime veteran Calais Campbell, if he wants to squeeze another year or two out of his career. But even if they do that, defensive tackle is a place where they need to continue to add players. If you look at their depth chart, it's Dexter Lawrence, it's Roy Robertson Harris, it's 2025 third round pick Darius Alexander, and then it's really nothing. It's really nothing, and the Giants have got to add players there. DJ Davidson's a free agent. Rakeem Nunez-Roches is a free agent. I think if the Giants really wanted to bring one of those guys or both of those guys back, they would have done it by now. So I would think that the Giants will be looking elsewhere to fill out the defensive line. But I did want to talk about some of the additions that they made. The Mooney deal specifically. 1 year, not sure what the base salary or what the guarantee is at this point, but I know it's, I believe it's up to $10 million with incentives, 1-year deal. And, Darius Slayton has been a good Giant for a number of years, but it feels to me like the signing of Mooney and the signing of former Pittsburgh Steeler Calvin Austin, who's more of a slot guy, but another guy that's going to be commanding some playing time. This could be pushing Darius Slayton to the background. Now, Slayton has a lot of guaranteed money on his contract in 2026. As we speak here, I'll try to look up the cap hit for Slayton this coming year. His cap hit is $15.9 million. The Giants would take more than $15 million in dead money if they cut him. So Darius Slayton's going to be on the roster. But when you look at Darnell Mooney is a similar type wide receiver to Darius Slayton, who has, in truth, been more productive than Slayton throughout his career. Mooney, of course, had a connection with Matt Nagy from the Chicago Bears, of course, where Mooney was drafted. While Nagy was head coach there. Had 1,000-yard receiving season, 81 catch, 1,055 yards in 2021. Had a 61 catch season as a rookie in 2020. In 2024 with the Atlanta Falcons, Mooney had 64 catches and came up 8 yards shy of 1,000 yards. Darius Slayton has had some good seasons for the Giants. Years where he's been, 45 to 50 catches, 700-yard seasons. But Darius Slayton has never had seasons like any of those that Darnell Mooney has had. So I look at Mooney as a guy who could push Slayton aside and take a good chunk of Slayton's playing time. Loved the signing of Calvin Austin as well. Another low-cost, incentive-laden deal. Guy that's had some experience catching the ball, guy who's got some punt return experience if the Giants need it. Another weapon, another guy that upgrades the depth at the wide receiver position as the Giants try to put more weapons around Jackson Dart, especially after losing Wan'Dale Robinson in free agency. So they're sort of remaking their wide receiver room. I don't necessarily think anything that they've done at wide receiver would preclude them if they were to believe that Carnell Tate would be the right guy to draft at number 5. I don't think what they've done to this point would stop them from doing that. I'm not a believer that Carnell Tate is the right choice at number 5. But if the Giants were to believe that, I don't think they have put themselves in a situation where they say, well, we can't because of what we did in free agency. And that's pretty much the case across the board. Cornerback, where they signed Greg Newsome. If they come across a cornerback in the first round or second round that they really, really want, there's no reason they can't or shouldn't take that player. Guard is the same situation. We talked about Aaron Stinney. And in that second wave of free agency, of course, the Giants re-signed Evan Neal. And look, I took a look at the contracts that the Giants signed a lot of these guys to. And people just need to breathe. Take it, relax about the Evan Neal contract. There's no guaranteed money in it. There's no signing bonus. There's no workout bonus. There's nothing in that contract for Evan Neal other than an opportunity. And, we're told that John Harbaugh and his staff wanted an opportunity to work with Neal. He's a 6'7", 350-pound former first-round pick. The Giants need to fill out their 90-man training camp roster. No harm, no foul here for them to take a look at Evan Neal. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, nothing lost if it doesn't work out. One thing I think it does speak to is I don't think Evan Neal had many options, because I don't think Evan Neal, given his first choice, or given other choices, I don't think Evan Neal would have really wanted to come back to the New York Giants. But I think it tells you that nobody was exactly banging down Evan Neal's door, offering him opportunities to come to a new NFL team to try to resuscitate his career. All right, another position where the Giants have done a really good job in the second wave of free agency of adding depth, adding special teams capability is at the safety spot. The Giants lost a good player in free agency in Dane Belton, 2022 fourth round pick. Really good special teams player, guy that's never been able to quite grab a full time starting job in the secondary. But the Giants have added several players. They added Ardarius Washington from the Ravens, who's a backup safety, a guy who has been a pretty decent player during his career. They added Elijah Campbell, from the Miami Dolphins, guy that's been mostly a special teams player and probably will be that for the Giants as well. Kevin Noggle of SB Nation's The Phinsider, which covers the Dolphins, said that Campbell has more potential on defense than you might think. But over his career, that hasn't really translated, and we'll see what we'll see if it does here in New York. But I think really Campbell is a Giant to fortify the special teams that we know are really, really important to John Harbaugh. The really interesting safety signing for me is Jason Pinnock, who spent the 2025 season with the San Francisco 49ers after being a Giant from 2022 to 2024. And of course, back up in 2022, became a full-time starter in 2023 after Xavier McKinney left. Pinnock had a really good season in 2023, playing in a really aggressive Wink Martindale defense that allowed Pinnock to play at the line of scrimmage a lot, to blitz the quarterback, to get up and play in the box and get into the backfield against the run. Not necessarily, have to sit back and be a center fielder or be a quarter of the field, face the quarterback, zone coverage kind of guy, which he was more or less asked to do in 2024 under Shane Bowen. Wasn't nearly as successful at it and then moved on. I think it's a really interesting signing because under Denard Wilson, the expectation is that the Giants are going to be a lot more aggressive on defense, that they're going to get after people a little bit more. They're going to play more press coverage. They'll maybe, Pinnock could be a guy that you could use, up at the line of scrimmage on occasion, sort of reprising that role that he had for Martindale in 2023, shooting gaps and making plays against the run, blitzing on third downs. So really interesting signing for me. We'll see if returning to New York sort of resuscitates Jason Pinnock's career. Another really interesting signing for the Giants is Jason Sanders, place kicker formerly with Miami Dolphins. Not sure that I saw that one coming, although I knew that John Harbaugh wasn't going to go into 2026 without some sort of challenge for Ben Sauls, the young left-footed kicker who came in and was so impressive in the Giants' final 3 games of 2025. 8 for 8 on field goals, granted no long ones from outside 50 yards, 7 for 7 on extra points, including a 48-yarder, which actually ended up being his longest kick. Impressed everybody with his professionalism, with his approach to the job. You remember the video of Jackson Dart saying during a practice, "This is the best kicker I've ever seen in my life." Something along that line. But I knew that with only a 3-game NFL resume, John Harbaugh was going to bring in competition. Jason Sanders is a one-time All-Pro in 6 or 7 years in Miami, coming off a hip injury that cost him the entire 2025 season. So we don't know. No guarantee that Jason Sanders is the same quality kicker that he was with the Dolphins. That he's still a plus kicker, from beyond 50 yards. No guarantee. And the contract that Sanders signed 1 year with very minimal guaranteed money indicates that the Giants think the same thing. They want to look. They want a competition between Sauls and a veteran kicker. There's a lot of upside with Jason Sanders if he's the same kicker that he was with the Miami Dolphins. And we'll see what happens here with Sanders and Sauls. But again, the Giants, with what they've done in free agency, have put themselves in a position where there's only the couple of those places where you can look and say, why haven't they done anything? Or it's an obvious tell at this point that they have to do something about those positions in the draft. And we've talked about that already. And I think also even the signing of Micah McFadden to join Tremaine Edmonds at off-ball linebacker, again, puts them in a position where if they want Sonny Styles at number 5 and he's there, they can certainly take him. If they think he's the best player and the guy that'll have the biggest impact, they can certainly take him. If they want safety Caleb Downs, they can certainly do that. Even though they've added a bunch of guys, they haven't added anybody, who is who you'd consider at this point a top tier, Pro Bowl caliber guy. So you could easily justify taking Caleb Downs as well. And the reality of it is, we're seeing more and more chatter. And Chris Sims of NBC kind of started this, I won't call it nonsense, but he started this when he told me at the Combine that he would love to see Jeremiah Love as a Giant, the Notre Dame running back, and that he was kind of rooting for it to happen. And there's more and more chatter now that you hear as you talk to draft analysts, as you read draft analysts. There's more and more chatter that Jeremiah Love is actually in play for the Giants. And I find this so interesting because you have a general manager who has been adamant about running back value. Was largely responsible for the Giants moving on from Saquon Barkley. You have Brian Daboll in Tennessee, who obviously was part of the regime that ended up letting Saquon Barkley leave. And now there's a lot of chatter that I find kind of delicious, kind of ironic, kind of funny. There's a lot of chatter that, well, maybe the Titans will take Jeremiah Love at number 4. I just find it sort of ironic that you have the former head coach who watched Saquon Barkley walk out the door and the general manager who sort of ushered him out the door, both in situations where their teams might take that running back at number 4 or number 5 in the draft. It's just a very, very weird sort of full circle thing. And with the Giants, it tells you that, this decision is not going to be Joe Shane's. We've talked about that a number of times. This decision is going to be John Harbaugh's and what John Harbaugh wants. And what I will say about the idea of taking Jeremiah Love at number 5 is this. I get the Saquon Barkley PTSD. And I was adamant for years that taking Barkley at number 2 for the Giants back in 2018, I think it was the wrong thing for Dave Gettleman to do. And I still believe that. The Giants were in a rebuild situation. They were in a situation with a quarterback who was near the end of his career. They had a head coach they had just hired who was acknowledged as a quality quarterbacks coach, guy that had has had success with a lot of different types of quarterbacks throughout his career. Of course, I'm talking about Pat Shurmur. I talked to Shurmur about a year ago, and Shurmur said that, more or less, said that had the Giants taken a quarterback, they would have taken Josh Allen. And I think who knows how that would have worked out, but that is the quarterback that Shurmur was banging the table for. Dave Gettleman wanted that running back. He saw, Saquon Barkley. He famously said he's one of only two players I've ever given a perfect scouting grade to, and I'm taking him, and we're not talking about it. We're not picking up the phone, any of that stuff. And my issue with that was the Giants were clearly in rebuild mode, or should have been in rebuild mode at that point. And starting a rebuild with a running back, to me, is just not the right idea. To me, it's a little different situation with the Giants right now. Yes, they're a 4-win team. Yes, they're a team that's won 7 games over the past 2 seasons. But are they really a rebuilding team? I don't necessarily see them that way. I might with a different head coach, but this is John Harbaugh. This is a guy who builds his teams around running the football on offense, or around controlling the game on offense, and around stopping the run on defense. So, the Ravens, while Harbaugh was head coach, never took a running back in the first round, but John Harbaugh is a coach who I think sees the value of the run game, sees the value of the big time running back. He had Derrick Henry that the Baltimore Ravens traded for. He had Ray Rice early in his tenure in Baltimore. He knows the value of a top tier back. And I can see, this is not a rebuild situation for the Giants. They believe that 4-win team should have been maybe a 7-win team, which wouldn't have gotten them to the playoffs. But you remember all of the games that the Giants lost in the fourth quarter, the inexplicable way that they blew a couple of those games, losing leads left and right, losing games that just should not have been lost. The Giants believe that was a 7 or 8 win team last year had it been coached better, but it didn't happen. So they think they're building from a 7-win roster with improvement at the head coaching position, with improvement throughout the coaching staff. They think they'll be coached better. They think they will be more talented and more competitive than they were in 2025. They don't look at this as starting a rebuild. I don't think John Harbaugh ever would have taken this job if he considered it a rebuilding situation. So for me, it's a different situation with a different head coach who has a different priority, who needs a bell cow running back to really be successful on offense. And as much as we all love Cam Scatterbo, he said the other day, he told Rich Eisen that he's still not running full speed yet. He's basically jogging at this point. And we don't know. We just, Scatterbo is expected to be fully healthy by training camp and all of that. But Scatterbo is still, he's to me, he's a good back. But you can still upgrade that position. So I just think it's a different situation for the Giants. I'm still not sure that I'm 100% on board with the idea of taking Jeremiah Love, but I do think that this is a different situation than the Giants were in when Dave Gettleman drafted Saquon Barkley. We'll have to see how it all plays out. We'll have to see what the Giants end up doing here. But, we've got another 6 weeks to argue about that, folks, and I'm sure that we'll do a lot of that. So with that said, Just to put a bow on it, did think that the Giants have done a lot of good work with getting some low cost free agents who should really help them here in free agency in the last few days. I think they've put themselves in a better situation heading into the draft, and we'll see where things go. Hopefully, they'll still add a couple more pieces, especially on the lines, before we get to the draft at the end of April. All right, Giants fans, I think that's a good place to call it a day. Thank you as always for watching. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.